I'm Jim Czek.
And I'm Renee Merrifield.
And we're here with Beyond the Ballot. It's Tuesday, September 23rd. And the big argument that's been going around the world for a while, the Biden administration, Trudeau and all that stuff. And it's kind of like, and I think today it really came to a head, this globalism versus nationalism. If you look at the left, the MAGA, they use MAGA and they kind of like paint it as a bad thing, make America great again. Obviously a very nationalist movement, right? And then the globalist view is this open borders and all that stuff, which has been going on in the United States and including in Canada. We see with migration and stuff like that here. But Carney has played the nationalist when he needed to, elbows up as a nationalist campaign, wrapped the flag around himself during the campaign. So they use it when they seem to use it. But I think the big point, though, is at the UN speech, Donald Trump minced no words and basically called out many of the globalist kind of ideas and called out even the use of the United Nations.
And I think that that's going to have a tremendous impact, because I think that message right now resonates more with the citizens than does the message that we're all, supposed to be this, united, a united colors of Benetton, as it were. I just don't think that is resonating anymore. You look at the unrest that's going on around the world. You look at the amount of rioting, at the amount of outcry when it comes to issues like immigration and being overtaken culturally, or about the amount of asylum seekers that are happening in Western nations. So I really think that some of this outrage, some of the social media posts that I've been seeing on my feed are pretty alarming, and the globalism front is really taking a hit.
Yeah, because we can see the countries that really adopted globalism or pitched it really hard. And then we look at the economies and we're going to see some of that evidence. And I think that the reality is what most, like middle America, middle Canada, like the middle class is really feeling I would say anything other than the elite class. Most Canadians, most Americans are really feeling the effects of what globalism promised. And you can say that same thing in the UK. There's riots in France. There's massive protests in the UK. And we're seeing this in Germany with the standard of living. And in Canada, 89% of Canadians now $200 away from meeting their monthly obligations. We're seeing the effects of what we've done for the past 10 years, which is in more this kind of a globalist purview. The climate agenda was a big part of that as well.
Yeah, indeed, and I really think that this is not the end. This is the beginning. I think what Trump allowed everyone to do was to say the quiet part out loud, and is going to even embolden some of the opinions that you're seeing from largely the right now. The right is really being seen as this anti-immigration, anti-globalist, side of politics. But you're also seeing them being incredibly successful. In some of the nations that have farther right leaders, you're seeing their economies thrive. You're seeing some of their, crime rates as some of the lowest. So I do think that there is going to be some definite lines drawn between what's happening on the ground and in their communities and what these politicians have led us to believe would happen.
Yeah, the pitch was that they were going to bring people up out of poverty, that this was going to kind of be a, like a globalist kind of view. Everybody's going to kind of get lifted up. But what it's actually done, though, is actually brought people down. Like if you take a nation like Canada that was very rich and, had a high standard of living, it's actually been dragged down as opposed to bringing people up, right? So it's actually hurt nations like Canada, hurt nations like the United Kingdom, hurt nations like France and all that. And they're the ones that have adopted it at an extreme level. And some of the things that Trump said in his speech, though, was that the UN, what purpose does it have? They're supposed to help stop wars. He claims to have stopped seven wars, and that the United Nations didn't even help him at all and wouldn't even write a letter for him, and that they actually were funding migration into the United States when, the Biden administration claimed for 4 years that they were trying to seal the border, but blamed it on Congress, that Congress wouldn't help seal the border, where Trump did that in because the reality is Trump did it, what, in 30 days, 20 days? I don't know, like right away. And then you find out that the UN, according to Trump, has been funding people to kind of come into the United States, giving them credit cards and all that kind of stuff. It was actually infiltrating their nation. And then, like he went after them too on the Ukraine war, saying you're trying to get the war to stop, but then you're feeding the Russian machine with buying Russian energy, because they kiboshed their own whole energy kind of like pipeline. Trudeau had a lot to do with that too, by not selling LNG to the Europeans and all that stuff. It's just kind of like they seem to be at odds with what they say. They say one thing, but then their actions kind of do another thing.
Yeah, and I can't tell you that Trump has actually stopped 7 wars. I would probably take exception with that claim. But what I will say is that he is drawing attention to the hypocrisy that exists, and in how the UN has been somewhat disingenuous with its intentions versus its actions. Now, as you know, I'm a big one, to look at the actions, and that's where you're going to find what the true intention is. And I think he's drawing it. I think he's drawing that out and saying, hey, look, you guys are doing this, which means you're no longer relevant. Because you're not doing these other things. I think he's got a huge point. I think that it's going to resonate with people. I think that you're going to see lots of social media posts about this particular one. And if I were Carney right now, wow, what is he doing? I mean, he's going out there and basically trying to be friends with the UN at a time that is not the most popular thing to be doing. And also, really juxtaposing himself to Trump. Which is, again, if you're trying to negotiate with the man, it's certainly not a good tactic to use at this point. So I'm very confused as to what he's actually trying to accomplish with some of the tactics that he's using right now. And the only thing I can think of is that he's ignorant and doesn't understand the ramifications of some of his actions.
I think perhaps maybe his ego is playing a bit of a role in this, because this is his peeps. This is the UN there. That's the peeps, like the administration, the bureaucracy. He's being treated like a rock star there, because Canada is kind of like the flag bearer for this globalist kind of movement. And Mark Carney was also part of that World Economic Forum. He was one of the leaders in that as well. And I think also one of the leaders in climate change, which was their big agenda. So I think like he's getting out there, he's getting the applause, he's getting that treatment there from the people that kind of in that administration of the UN. And I think he's just kind of, some of the stuff he's saying. The 2 biggest economies in the world, China and the United States, we have trade wars with, and like the canola one, it's really bad. I mean, the canola growers are now saying they want like almost $2 billion in compensation, but I mean the only canola buyers are the Americans and the Chinese, and then we're at odds with both of them.
Oh, it's horrific right now. So Carney does not have plan B, and we don't have anyone else to sell to. And we do have full industries that are being harmed. The whole globalism, initiative is not good for Canada, largely because it suppresses energy resource sectors. That is, it's key to our success. And it's key to the success of other countries, which is why the EU is taking it on the chin right now, because they don't have energy and they're trying to get it from Canada and instead getting it from the US and from Russia. Like, I think, which are the 2 largest economies in the world. No, really, China is larger than Russia, but certainly fueling a war is definitely happening with the EU buying Russian energy. So, I mean, honestly, it is such a mess. It is time for a reset button. You're seeing the rioting. You're seeing people say enough is enough. We want to have prosperity. We want to be able to feed our family. We want to have, know where our next paycheck's coming from. And right now, Carney is not giving us a path forward on that. And in fact, I think his budget's going to be worse than what we could ever imagine.
And I think one of the big statements that Trump made, I mean, he's several statements. I mean, I would advise people to go and watch the full thing, just watch and listen to some of the key points in there. One of the things he said there was that he called climate change the greatest con job ever perpetuated and a scam. And Canada has basically been using that agenda for the past, through the Trudeau Liberals, and I don't think Mark Carney hasn't walked away from it at all. There's a clip, I think we might play it later here, where he said that there's companies in Canada that have invested big in climate change. So what do we say to them? And one company comes to mind for me that's invested big in climate change, and that would be Brookfield, right?
Brookfield. Yeah, in fact, I saw on X this morning just a side-by-side quote from him and it was actually his UN speech, and then it was a quote that he had said at Brookfield's shareholder meeting, and so it was like from 2020 and 2025, but they were almost identical.
I mean, and we're seeing the shift. There was a lot of pressure on the banks in Canada. If we take it just from a Canadian perspective, the big banks had all adopted these ESG goals and stuff like that. And every one of them walked away from that organization that Mark Carney was actually chaired. I can't remember the name of it now, some climate net zero or something. I think he was in charge of. You'd have to go find that thing. But all the big banks walked away from him. But when in his platform, he said he was going to force them back in. Like I remember his election platform said he was going to force the banks back to adhere to that. So I haven't heard that hasn't come to be yet, but we're early on. He hasn't put his budget out there yet. And I guess the interesting part in this the UN thing was Trump arrives, him and Melania step on the escalator and it stops working. and he goes up there and the teleprompter doesn't work, and it's just like it's almost like our technical difficulties this morning, just like somebody didn't want him to do anything. So but he knows how to wing it anyway. I don't think Donald Trump needs much of a teleprompter.
No, in fact,
I think that same story over and over.
I think some of his comms team actually feel like he could use more of a teleprompter in more. It's the GFANZ, so it's the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. And you're right, they've all stepped away, they've all walked back, they have all done away with it, and it would be incredibly detrimental if they were forced to adhere to it at this point. You cannot put us on another uneven playing field. And what's going to happen is that more investment dollars are going to go to the States. It's just, it is a rapid exit to other markets right now, and that would force more dollars outside of Canada.
And then the other thing that Mark Carney has done in the last couple of days, which is odd while we're trying to work out a trade deal, the timing doesn't seem to work so much. Recognizing the state of Palestine along with the UK and Australia. And it seemed like the UK and Canada put out that statement at the same time, including Mark Carney using the British spelling of recognize. And so obviously it might have been a cut and paste from the United Kingdom. And then Trump coming out and saying that it just emboldens as a reward. And that Hamas actually came out and said that, they said, see, this is part of our victory. And it was actually used right away almost against, or as a victory by, justifying the October 7th event.
And I think that, most of the political commentators that I've been watching so far have been very, very cautious about this move. I recognize that, with our allies like Australia and the UK, there might have been a temptation to go there. When I think about politicians who have really fought against that pressure, Stephen Harper comes to mind. He always had such a diplomatic, we're just going to be, more like Switzerland and be in the middle here. We're not going to choose one side. This is a particularly nasty, divisive war that I would have strongly recommended that Carney not take a side at this point, especially because they had a vote in the House, just in the 72 days that they were actually in the House, and it was denied. So I really believe that this was a poor political move at a time when our relationship with the U.S. is so fragile. There is no mistake which side the U.S. was. For us to choose the opposite really does not bode well for a direction on trying to get a trade negotiation solidified. And for what? Like, what is the gain? And again, Palestine does not have borders, does not have a capital, does not have, to actually call it a state, I don't know what that actually references. And Hamas is still in control. And until you don't have a terrorist, organization in control, I don't know how you actually make that case for it. So I think this is a really dangerous one. And I would have strongly, if I was advising Carney, I would have recommended that he not take this move at this time. Let me put it this way: Australia and the UK are not negotiating with Trump to the same extent that Canada has to right now.
Well, UK has a deal. The United Kingdom has a deal. And then the other factor in that is, like, Canada, the parliamentary process. What surprises me is that he did this on his own. Like, he did this on his own. He didn't bring it because they're sitting, so there's no excuse not to do it and have a vote and have a discussion and allow Canadians, like the elected people of Canada, to have a say in this. He decided on his own.
Yeah. And, the parliamentarians, I don't know if you watched the speech in the House I think it was yesterday, it might have been this morning even, but, it was at the end of it, at the end of each of his sentences, he said, "It's evil." And, I'll find the MP that delivered the statements. But I think it was a very powerful message, which basically was like, how can you choose one side? It wasn't even necessarily going, we should have chosen Israel. It was, how could you choose a side? And I thought it was very appropriate that the Conservatives had, a very racially identified MP deliver the message as well, so that it was, it wasn't casting judgment.
So, like, Trump made a very, to the point, like, and he targeted certain groups, especially the European Union and that. But Ursula von der Leyen sat down with him right after that and thanked him for his commitment to alleviate the plight of Ukraine's missing children, and that they're going to work towards a better tomorrow together. And he really called them out for buying the oil and gas from Russia, which makes no sense at all, right? If you think about it, you're actually fueling the war. I mean, Trump pointed that out. It's obvious, but it's odd that our media doesn't pick up. You're actually giving Russia the money to fuel the war against Ukraine, the one that you say you're trying so hard to stop. Seems odd, no?
It's very odd. It's very odd. And there is a definite, causal relationship between where Russia is getting funding for their war and the sale of their energy. So, good on Trump for drawing attention to the hypocrisy right now. It is horrific, and it needs to be spoken.
Because, I think Putin would have stopped that war a long time ago if his economy was suffering. It actually helped his economy. Remember when they said they were going to crush his ruble, and then the actual ruble went up because Putin says you got to buy oil and gas in rubles. So they made the other countries buy rubles. So actually he ended up supporting his economy, and and he's been able to sell his oil and gas at higher prices because oil and gas went up through the roof after they started that war, right? So there was a time when oil and gas was actually it was like $10, and then it went down to negative for a bit there because there was so much oil and gas in the market they couldn't store it. So, wow.
Yeah, and whether it's oil and gas or whether it's steel, the Russia-Ukraine war has definitely has increased the prices across the board, and it's everyone that's having an effect. If Canada had its energy for sale the way we should right now, Russia wouldn't be able to propel its war forward, but we don't. So therefore, Russia is a viable option for the EU.
So the Liberals, a lot of pressure on them by Poilievre to come up with the bail reform. We've seen it. We've done the interviews with even Mayor Tom Dias here talking about bail reform. This kind of catch and release. And in Kelowna alone, there's one offender that has like 230 plus cases, 32 failures to comply, 32 failures to appear. And I think just a small group of individuals are responsible for about 1,500 crimes. And this is played out throughout British Columbia and Canada, and asking for bail reform. But Sean Fraser said, "Well, we'll do that later, but let's get this one out here first." And it's the hate speech or the Hate Act, and now some BC Civil Liberties Association and Canadian Civil Liberties Association said this law could criminalize peaceful protests simply because they're seen as disruptive, which brings out like the Freedom Convoy and stuff like that, right? So it seems odd that that's their first target as opposed to catch and release where we've seen a young girl, 3 years old, I think you corrected me that time, a 3-year-old girl that was raped by a repeat offender, homes broken into, a father killed in front of his children, that this would be the one that they would go to first. It seems odd.
It's not just odd, it's absurd. It's absurd, and it's not what people are asking for. People are not asking for a hate speech law. People are asking for their streets to be safe. That it is so baffling to me how out of touch this Liberal government is right now. And I don't understand why. I mean, Sean Fraser, whether it's, threatening the Constitution and the notwithstanding clause, or whether it is, it is putting forward this hate speech law, which really has no relevance right now. This is not one of the top items that that Canadians are thinking about, or that is affecting their lives today. So why they are choosing this path, it's just aimless. And it seems like clearly Carney has not had the positive affect that we thought he possibly could have. He is not taking us off of virtue signaling, taking us off of the soft edges of the left agenda. He is simply allowing that to run rampant, and at the same time not giving us a vision, for an economy forward, and also possibly taking us down into a further deficit path, one that's going to invest for generations so that generations will have to pay back that debt.
On the censorship thing, like, we have Bill C-18 that continues to crush local independent media in here, which is another way to censor, to have one voice, the CBC, which is a very biased voice. And then you add that with this Combating Hate Act, and then Google finally coming out and admitting that they were pressured as well. X said that, and then Facebook, Zuckerberg said that. Now all of a sudden Google coming out and says, yeah, that was wrong. We shouldn't have went after the right. I mean, you faced some of that censorship yourself. Danielle Smith was removed from the platforms. I mean, this was like kind of the thing that they actually loved. The left was really pushing hard to censor. Donald Trump was removed from almost all platforms at that time. And then even Mark Carney's speech there yesterday, I believe it was, he's talking about, Canadians don't want to wake up in the morning and read on X what Trump is doing, or read on Truth Social. They really don't like X. They really don't like X at all, because Elon Musk, like some people would say, he actually saved the world by taking over X, because that was the first crack in the dam, right? They had them all. They had all the big platforms. Elon Musk taking over that was a huge fight. That was the crack in the dam, and with Mark Zuckerberg coming out and saying that he was pressured. Now Google today, or yesterday, I think they said that they admitted to it as well.
And taking the bans off of the YouTube accounts as well that were banned. I mean, I think that across the board, they're unleashing, and I think that people will be very surprised to know how many people actually believe in the same manner. I think that, it was very isolating. It was very, and you're right, Elon Musk, with X was pretty much the first to really unleash all of the voices that were feeling very isolated and alone. And not all of them are great. Don't get me wrong. I don't like, ones that, get vicious and nasty, but oh my goodness, it happens on both sides. And as someone who was on Twitter before, and it was through the DMs, and it was through the text messages, and it was through the emails, and through snail mail even, that I heard a very different voice than what was being telegraphed on media and what was being telegraphed on social media. Social media, I mean, it was vile, but all coming from the left. And the other voices were just saying, thank you for standing up for us, thank you for saying what we feel, and what can we do to support you. So I think that people are going to be surprised when the lid actually comes off at where the balance actually is.
Yeah, and we did see evidence. I don't want to go too far down that route, but we did see evidence of when Jimmy Kimmel was apparently taken off the air, how the left lost its mind. But they were dancing in the street when Trump was taken off, and like many conservative voices were removed from platforms. They didn't seem to stick up for freedom of speech at that point. But I don't want to beat that thing to death. But we do have Mark Carney here talking about the climate agenda here and how important it is for the companies that have invested in it.
And so they all of a sudden become in a position where they're quite advantaged. So if we took away the carbon tax, then they'd be like, wait a minute, we just made this massive investment and you didn't do it. That's first point. Second is we're diversifying away from the Americans. And guess what? The countries we're diversifying to care about this. We will not have access to the European market. We will not have access to the UK market and increasingly major Asian markets unless we are getting our emissions down. And then the third point is, guess what? The Americans change their mind every once in a while. And now apparently they don't care about it. They're going to care about it again. And we are going to put ourselves in a position where we leapfrog the Americans with respect to carbon competitiveness. Yeah. And that is good for Canada long term. I mean, obviously it's good for the planet, but it's good for Canada long term. And so
This is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. I mean, the deals that have been struck with Japan and the EU for the oil and gas markets with Germany will absolutely say that Carney is wrong. And the lack of global competitiveness in ferry production will tell Carney that he is wrong. And the flood of dollars away from Canada will tell Carney that he is wrong. Like, I don't know how else to put this. We have lost the battle, and there is no battle to be had anymore. People are walking away from the battlefield, and they're simply saying we can't compete and we can't make money if we continue on this agenda. The companies that are making money are the ones that profit from other companies having to abide by this agenda. It is not from companies that are actually in that space. Those companies are either subsidized by government or, making money through or going under even. They are not making money to the same extent as the companies that are not underneath all of the emissions caps that we see today.
Well, we know that Brookfield is one of those that made large investments, carbon credits and all those types of things. And it seems like even Europe right now, who sabotaged their own economy for this climate agenda, seems to be changing their tune a little bit here. Because when Trump was in there with Starmer there, he was even talking about reopening the North Sea and stuff like that. And obviously, the EU buying natural gas from LNG from the Americans and all that stuff.
Yes.
So are the liberals out of touch, or are they really just working on their own personal interests in this way? Because if you look at the documents for Stephen Guilbeault, who's one of the I guess you would call an extremist environmentalist in Canada that led our environmental policy, they still won't turn over those documents where there's alleged that there's a couple $100 million that were funneled into companies that he had influence over. They still won't release those documents. And how can you say that this is all good if you won't even release those documents? And then I guess the second question is, why wouldn't you release the documents, even to take even that shadow off of it, right, of how great the climate agenda is?
The only reason that you wouldn't release the documents is because you are hiding what's in them and you fear what's in them. That's the only reason. Otherwise, you would just release them because they're innocuous. And it's like the Epstein files. The only reason that, they all voted to not release them was because there's damning evidence inside of them. That's the only reason. I'm going to go back to this. Follow the money. You follow the money, you're going to figure out why, what the motivation is. It's not about power. It's about money. And absolutely, is this self-interest? For sure it is. We've talked about Carney's lack of, or his conflicts of interest, and they are so great. And someone said, why would you want to be the Prime Minister of Canada if you're independently wealthy and the head of Brookfield? The only reason that you'd want to do that is because you stand to benefit from it. And he's making sure that they benefit from it. I don't think he realizes how precarious this is. The last poll that I saw, the environment ranked, I think it was number 7 out of 9 in terms of priorities for Canadians. Canadians are struggling right now to put food on the table. And when you are struggling, you are not thinking about, making sure that the globe is all, protected. I will also say that the amount of information that has come out, and I wouldn't go so far as to say what and ally myself with Trump's opinion of this is the biggest con, but I would say that the reality is Canada could cease to exist tomorrow, and we would not make a tangible impact. 1.6% of the world's emissions are Canada's. That is not a tangible impact on the whole globe. So why we would, cut off our noses to spite our faces with our energy sector right now, and instead, look at how we could lower global emissions by actually providing LNG to India and to China and to the EU, is beyond me. And this reeks of agenda from Mark Carney. And, I don't want to be right on this one. I don't want to be right. I know that you and I on election night, I was like, has no one read his book Values? Like, he gave us his whole treatise as to who he is and what he's about. So I am so scared that this is the path that he takes us down again. But so far, he has not shown us any other direction.
I guess in that little speech he made there, what he's trying to sell to Canadians is like this sacrifice is important because, one, he attacks Trump and says Trump won't be there forever. So he thinks it's going to go back to the way it was. That's saying that Rubio and Vance and them won't carry forward the agenda. And two, that Canadians need to make this sacrifice because otherwise we won't be able to deal with the European Union and that. But I mean, right now it's looking like if the Brits had an election today, Starmer's out. And the same thing goes for Macron. It looks, so then what is Canada going to be? Like, they say Canada's going to lead in this. Is Canada going to be the leader of one? Do you know what I mean? They're going to lead our economy into where we are and we're going to show you some charts here in a bit, showing you where we've been led to for the past 10 years, where it has led us. And talking about oil and gas, here's a survey that was put out, Angus Reid survey, and it shows you what Canadians want. Mark Carney just told you what he wants, but this is what Canadian wants. And this is, like the CPC mostly want oil and gas. And then the Liberals even they want, there's more Liberals that want oil and gas. The only ones that don't want the oil and gas is the NDP and the Bloc. And the Bloc, I think, just uses that to just get whatever they want. You know what I mean? They use it as a card to like, give me more money, give me more of this, or I'll vote against everything, right? So
yeah, they use that as basically their trump card against the Albertans, and Alberta just keeps giving them money. So I totally
Here's
agree.
the chart. Here's the chart. Like, I mean, this is the thing, right? This is where 10 years of Liberal leadership has got us. This is the moment right here.
Yeah,
and then somebody tells you that that this is working. Like Mark Carney says, we're going to lead. I'm just like, where on this chart is the leadership? And here's the more troubling part of this. Right now, we're probably in the biggest technology revolution that our generation has ever seen, bigger than the industrial age. And we're talking about the AI and technology. 85–90% of the largest technology companies in the world are located in the United States of America, and you can't see second place with a telescope. Like, there is no second place, right? There's nobody to rely on. They're all there. NVIDIA is like one of the most important companies in the world. Actually has a GDP, I think, higher than Canada. I could go on and on. Like all the Tesla, all this most important companies.
Yeah.
That Palantir, that the Canadian government seems to have taken up, like, confrontation with, right? Yeah, they seem to even want to have confrontations with Elon Musk, calling him a Nazi, and you know what I mean? Like, it just makes no sense in the world. Now they have fights with Meta, and then they have fights with, I don't know. I could probably rant on this, but just look at the chart.
I saw a great graph, and it actually showed the top 5 companies in the U.S. and the top 5 companies in Canada on the stock exchanges, and it was, you're right, all tech companies on the top 5 on the U.S. And guess what were the top 5 in Canada?
Oil and gas, resource stocks,
banks.
Oh yeah, the banks. Yeah, but right underneath that, there would have been the reason. But a lot of them left, though. They left and they went New York listings, right? Barrick, Kinross's and all that stuff, and it's we don't have much left here. But anyway, I want, if you get into an argument with anybody on this stuff, this is And I always say the market speaks the truth. The market speaks the truth. And this is Joe Kernan from CNBC talking to Hakeem Jeffries here.
Inflation rate itself was 2.7% in the most recent read year over year versus it got to a high of 9% under Biden. Stocks are at record highs. Unemployment is 4.2%. That's full employment. The GDP was 3%. The border is actually secure. We've got trade deals with EU, Japan, many more in the works, and trillions of dollars of foreign investment coming here. Iran's nuclear ambitions have been set back indefinitely. And I just wrote down a few things. So I just have to ask you, where is the calamity that you're talking about? And it almost seems like for Democrats, socialism is the answer to these problems. Or, I don't know, what, an end of democracy or something? We just don't get it.
Yeah, and having friends and family still down in the US, what they tell me is that things are still going pretty well. Like, people have jobs, people are pretty, and they don't like Trump. And, there's not a lot of like, oh yeah, I just love who he is. But most people are not against what he is doing. So I from that perspective, I don't see. I would have to agree with the minority House leader, because I honestly see a lot of metrics. The U.S. we would not even compare with the U.S. right now. Our metrics are all. I would struggle to find one that would be better than the U.S. right now.
Well, our unemployment is over 7, which is like near disaster. Our borders are not closed. Our GDP was negative, I think, the last quarter. That chart I just showed you. Investment
plummeted.
The most important one, you and I talk about this all the time, the capital fleeing Canada. That's the big one, right? That's the big one. You're involved in development, and we're seeing development, which was really the engine for Canada outside of resources, right? It's the engine is property development. And that is, the cranes are coming down, the cranes are not going back up for that most part. We're seeing high mortgage defaults in Vancouver and Toronto and that kind of stuff. It's like housing is where the majority of Canadians have their wealth. And right now it's a scary spot. And so you can gaslight all you want, but the actual thing, like the markets don't lie. And like the stock market's made like 48 new highs in the past couple of months. Like the stock market is going up. And the one that you can't argue, it's the trillions and trillions of dollars that are going to the United States in investment, and the jobs that will come from it. Like the Meta's building a data center that is bigger than Manhattan. Like, think about that for a second. It's bigger than this, like Manhattan. Like billions of dollars. NVIDIA, Oracle, all these things are just huge, huge investments into the future, right? Into the future of what's going on. And that's the big thing. And then, when they tell you all this other stuff, and then if I was a Liberal or a CBC, I would say to Mark Carney, you did it yourself. You moved Brookfield to the United States to access capital. You said it. It's in the letter. It says, we moved Brookfield to the United States to access capital. And then his own investments, like over 90% of his investments are in the United States. The United States, like, keeping in mind, the United States is the biggest economy in the world. It's also where capital goes, right? It's the biggest stock market in the world. It's where capital goes. It's where people list, even Chinese list their companies on there. It's the biggest military machine. It's so many things, and it seems like our prime minister doesn't recognize that fact and is all about virtue signaling and wants to stick a stick in it all the time so that he can get some applause from Rosemary Barton.
Yeah, and I love the rant, Jim, because it is truly, people need to wake up. Canada is falling so far behind. There is no hope. Our kids don't have hope. Our kids, I read an interesting article about what the difference is between, Gen Xers and the, Gen Zers today. And in large part, it's because, Gen X and the millennials still had hope. They knew that if they worked hard, they were going to make it and get ahead and be able to buy a house, etc. And the Gen Zers are no longer believe that. They don't believe that there is hope. They don't believe that if they work hard, they're going to get ahead and that they're going to be able to make enough money. That lack of hope is really, really destructive to a community, society, economy. So I think we're in very dire times. I know I've been sounding the alarm bell for for the last year and a half as we've gone through different markets, etc. But I think that this is going to get darker, and that we have some really difficult roads ahead. And it's true, the U.S. their cost of living is lower, and they're doing better on their paychecks. I know I brought up Boise, Idaho before, but Boise, Idaho, the average house price is $435,000. House, not condo. Average house is $435,000, and the average income earner in Boise, Idaho, is $130,000. Like, it's outrageous. Just how great their standard of living is.
And this is just as for people like I've been a CPA for a while. I mean, the markets, the stock market typically doesn't lie. Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like this indisputable truth, because where money flows is kind of where truth flows. You know what I mean? Like you can gaslight about an economy, you can kind of tell these things, like you can kind of make hyperbole, and you can all these things. But if you look at the actual thing that's happening, Mark Carney put his money in the United States. He put his company in the United States. Like you listen to what he says, and then you have to ask, who's he saying it for? Like, who's he trying to fool? Like, who's he trying to trick? And then if we look at the freedom of the press in Canada, he's saying it so that the pundits on CBC will applaud and kind of keep that base all kind of like coddled, and like they're just like, yes, he's going to fix things, and climate's the most important thing. For most people that can't pay their monthly obligations, have no dream of getting a home, all that, I think those are the most important concerns for a lot of people. It's the kitchen table stuff, and we talk about it all the time, right? If you can't put food on the table, and remember when Trudeau, just before he left, he said that we know that it's tough, that you can't put food on the table and you can't pay your rent, but there's bigger things, more important things. Says the elitist as he jumps into a jet and jets off somewhere and eats off of your tax dollars, right?
Yeah, and profits off his foundation. I mean, he's so out of touch, but Carney is showing himself to be as out of touch as Trudeau. Yeah. And that's a scary thing.
And then I was just going to bring it up. We kind of touched on it. The canola farmers are in really tough shape. Canola is a tough market, right? Canola is such a tough market to develop. It's not like, you just go sell it to anybody else. And China, the biggest buyers are China and the U.S. And, we're in a trade battle with both of them, and we don't seem to be trying to rectify either one of those situations. So
no, the grains, these grains are actually created for these markets. It wasn't, it's not like they existed in large part before that. I mean, the great thing about the grain industry is that they can flip it next year and they could, do something else. But wheat is down as well because of these tariffs. So they're in fairly bad state right now, and Canada doesn't have money to bail out all of these industries that they're not dealing with the tariffs on. So I don't know what's going to happen here, but I would say, like, make a deal with China, get over it, get the I understand that the EVs tariffs are specifically to try and ally ourselves with the U.S. But right now we don't need to. Right now we need to survive, and I'd be doing something very different here, and at least giving another piece of leverage to ourselves. So I think this is going to go a very bad way, as all of these farmers are taking their crops off right now.
Well, let's switch gears here a lot. This is a big one. This is I actually can't even believe it. This is the Vancouver Sun put this story out here. Eleanor Sturko booted from the BC Conservative Party caucus. And that was just after that John Rustad leadership review.
And, my phone was lighting up last night. I was actually at a speaking engagement in Victoria, and my phone was just going nuts. And I was like, what happened? And then, as I opened my phone, I saw what had happened. So, honestly, this is a scary thing. I really believe that Eleanor Sturko is a sacrificial lamb. I personally know of 4 or 5 different individuals that are circling the wagons and starting to politic to really take John down. There was a great conversation and a great article by Rob Shaw that was put out as well. Rob Shaw basically said, yeah, you can silence one person, but really, if there's more, it's going to be very difficult. And you can win a leadership review, but with that little turnout, honestly, if he doesn't have the vote or the confidence of his caucus, it's not going to go far. I think John is in a dangerous place right now. I think that Eleanor might have said the quiet part out loud, but I don't think she's the only one. She even says in the article, well, I was just saying what other people are feeling, and are saying to each other. And as a leader, you want to know what your people are saying. You want to understand what the issues are at hand, and you want to be trying to solve them. And I don't think John's doing that. I think that what he's trying to do is just silence anyone through fear that wants to oppose him. This is really bad. It's going to be a bad politic because it's completely internal. This is not something that was ever seen outright, outside of the internal workings of the caucus. This is something that literally was just inside ball, and I think that it's not going to wear well for John.
This is the gift that keeps on giving for the NDP, though. David Eby and the crew there can almost do anything they want because they're just like, hey, as bad as we do, you guys just are in no position to kind of come in here because, in the election, you and I did the election coverage too. In the election, we also interviewed. I interviewed Falcon and Rustad several times. And I talked to them privately, and the handoff when Kevin Falcon, the party that you were part of, when Kevin Falcon decided to drop the BC United out, he decided to take the party out as well as himself. He decided that on his own, it seemed like. He decided to do that. And then, he basically handed the ball to John Rustad at the 1-yard line, but John just threw the ball on the ground and says, I don't need it. And we saw what happened there with, 2 weeks to go, no communication to strong candidates that were, part of the BC United. And then, trying to put the best team forward, they decided that they didn't want to do that and stuck with some loyalties. And I think if they would have done that, they would have, been in government right now, I believe, because some of those races were very tight, right?
I think that if he had done that, we wouldn't have a One BC party. Because none of those people would have ever seen a ballot because they are one issue politicians, and they really have they should not be where they are today. So he wouldn't have that issue. If he had been a consensus builder and built a larger tent and built out those individuals, I don't think he would also be kicking Eleanor Sturko out right now. From the outside, Eleanor is a star candidate and star MLA. She's done great work. She's been very successful. So for him to now then punt her over politics and over being threatened by her, I think just shows his weakness and shows how close to the edge he actually is. So I'm just going to put this out there that whoever is the next leader of the BC Conservatives, I think they should welcome Eleanor back with open arms. She did represent, farther to the left of the Conservative, right wing, but a big tent should be a big tent. And she wasn't kicked out because of her politics. She was kicked out because of her politicking. And I think that a threat to the leader should not be a reason to be to be punted.
Isn't the reality of the situation in British Columbia is a more kind of like a center kind of like population, like a more centered, even maybe center left a bit? I mean, like you say yourself, like you're conservative for the financial aspect of it, but also liberal leaning as far as, like the social parts of it. And I think that is, I would say, is the typical British Columbian. And you need somebody that can kind of facilitate, like you say, the big tent to bring people together. And we've seen a couple of examples where John Rustad has done the opposite of that. And I would, like the Kevin Falcon thing, that was a huge opportunity. Just a Zoom call, that's all it would have taken, hey? And you would have said, you got everybody on both parties together and said, hey, whoever wants to drop out right now, drop out. And you probably would have got 10 people that would have just dropped. And it's, okay, let's figure out a system where we can figure out we can put the best candidate forward, because British Columbia is more important than our egos. That's the only line you needed to say. British Columbia is more important than our egos, right?
I can't have all of you, but I need every one of you. Like, you know, how do you rally the troops, bring everyone together, build consensus, like, you know, give room and voice? Like, oh my goodness, he just needs some leadership. But, you know, from the get-go, I've said John is he is not going to be the strongest leader. And we've seen that, and we've seen that that's why they still have issues. And in the absence of leadership, true leaders will fill the void. And yeah, I think that's where he was a little bit concerned about Eleanor. Yep.
And if my advice would have been, or if I was in that position, I would have said, I'll even follow my own sword. I'm willing to put my leadership up to the test as well. So let's put the best team forward, the best leader forward, because British Columbia is more important than another 4 years of the NDP party. But no, what we saw was it was ego. And what we saw, it seems like what we're seeing right here again is, because I just interviewed Eleanor Sturko, very strong, very well spoken. You see it in the issues. I think, maybe he sees her as a threat, because she definitely could, take on a leadership role. She's a very strong candidate for sure. And but it seems like short-sighted to attack. Even if you're in a company, there's somebody good in your company, you don't want to promote them. I mean, you don't fire all the good people, do you? You just say, hey, that person can take my job one day, I'm going to fire that person, right? So all we have is really bad people working here, right?
Yep, that is a bad leader. That is a bad leader, because they're so insecure and they're so weak that they actually will just silence anyone that opposes them.
I think this one might come back to no different than Kevin Falcon with his famous tweet, I guess, according to the two of them when they when I mean, that's that whole thing. The United Party fell apart because of that, right? Because of that tweet between Rustad and Kevin Falcon.
Well, that was it. The tweet was, it wasn't a tweet, it was a text message, I believe. And the text message did not come from Kevin. So it's, that was a lie, but, and I'll call it a lie because I actually saw the text message, and I saw the one that John was referencing. So that was a lie. A reporter actually asked him to produce it, and he did not. So that tells you right there. If it was there, and he would have been more than happy to show it.
So at some point, egos can't be the biggest thing. But again, the beneficiary of this is definitely the NDP party, because. Yeah.
And we need right now politicians to be thinking about the Canadian public. We need them to be thinking about the British Columbians. Really, Danielle Smith does an amazing job at thinking about the Albertans. I would say that the Bloc Québécois do a great job about thinking about the.
And no denying that, right? No denying that. And and you make a great point there, because the Bloc looks after Quebec, right? I mean, the CBC and CTV try to label, and so do the Liberals, label NDP as well, label MAGA as this distasteful, horrible thing, right? Because it's like, MAGA is like a nationalist movement. The Bloc is a nationalist movement. It's literally a nationalist movement. That's all it is. They call themselves their own nation. It is literally a nationalist movement. And where's the attacks on the Bloc? None.
Totally. None. I'll leave us with this today, because I know we're running out of time, but I was golfing down in the States during Trump's first election, or first term, I should say. And I stepped in it. I was talking with this lovely couple that we were golfing with, and talking about Trump and what they thought of him. And they were like, well, we don't really care. We really like him. And I was like, but isn't he kind of a bully? And they looked at me and they said, well, yes, but he's our bully. And I think that's what, generally there's a lot of tolerance for a leader that is working on the behalf of the people. And right now we just don't have that. That's why Evie is on such thin ice. And, honestly, everyone needs to be listening and watching for what's going on with the Heritage Act right now. Very scary changes to it that are being put out in policy documents right now, and kind of piggybacking on the Cowichan decision, piggybacking on the Haida Gwaii new legislation. Very, very scary for what it means for property rights in British Columbia. Hopefully the government of Canada picks it up, but they haven't yet. So a lot of concern over where we're going right now, and nobody really seems to be defending the rights of the general public. And yesterday I was on a briefing call with the minister, and I loved the policy person that was on there from business. And she kept saying, "But minister, your job is to act in the best interest of all public." And I was like, wow, that's amazing that this has to be a reminder right now. So scary times right now, and we got to keep our face forward. We are the deciders because it's a democracy, and we get to vote. So definitely have to keep eyes and ears wide open and talk about things that we are seeing and hearing.
I do want to just tell people to listen with your common sense, listen to the gaslighting, make sure that you're aware of what's going on, and then look at the real hard data that comes out of it. I know the one last thought I'll leave with is Mark Carney, in one of his speeches in New York there, he said that, come to Canada because we have some of the most competitive tax regimes in the world. We just dropped our capital gains tax. And I'm just like, literally, you just said that? You just said that? You literally advised Trudeau to increase the inclusion rate to 75%, and then you rescinded it before it even became law. Yeah, and now you're bragging about it. But what it does do to people, it takes away certainty, because like one day you're just going to do this and that. I mean, that is the certainty most people look for in capital. So even if you think that is a plus, you shouldn't have said anything about it, right? Because better not said, right?
Totally. No, agreed. We need a lot more certainty. And right now, we're seeing that across the board in other countries.
All right. Thank you, Renee, as usual. That's been great. As usual, we had a great discussion, and hopefully we can help people at least question what you're being told, right? At least question what you're being told.
Thanks so much, Jim, and thanks Now Media.
Yeah, and thank you for watching Now Media.